So it's much easier to target a few individuals here and there and isolate them in some way. But if you know, they're in a big group, for example, you know, 8 people in one house, and they're all making the same claim, saying, you know, they're all what are the odds then that 8 different people are suddenly all mentally ill at the same time? I mean, that's not very likely. It's not even likely that 4 people are all mentally ill all at the same time. So that's why I feel some of the torture that was used against us in the United States was discontinued when we went to Canada, because simply for the reason that we were living with other people, and the United States or Canada, they could not or would not use that same technology to cover the same kind of area that they were covering in Wenatchee. But there were other kinds of technology and forms of torture that they did continue to use, and I do know that Canadians knew about it, because a couple of the guards in the Canadian jail, the first time I was arrested for 3 days, there's actually, I should be very clear, there was one guard who really, there were couple guards, maybe, some of the guards were very nice. There were a couple of guards, though, that I could tell didn't like me, and there was one in particular that I knew that I was being tortured, and I thought that he either had something on him and was doing it, because he came over to watch me when it happened to me, and then he snarled at me and smirked, and every single time that he came by, something happened to me. And it was one specific man. I mean, I didn't know anything about it at all. And so, I mean, I definitely know that Canada was involved. It wasn't just the United States crossing over their territory and targeting us still. I mean, the man that we were staying with, even in Canada, there were things going on in that house that he was aware of. So all of that to say, I'm hoping to help you to be able to accept the idea that these things really do happen, and really have happened and continue to happen to my family. And so the challenge that I've had is basically proving that I'm not mentally ill. And a big reason why I never did videotapes before is because I valued my privacy that much. I didn't want the first videotapes of myself to the entire world to be about this. I thought, if I ever get ahead in the world and a lot of people know me, I hope it's because of something that I've accomplished. You know, like whether it's music, because I still had aspirations for music, and I thought, I just need to hold off and hope this goes away, because if I decide to get into music and something takes off with that, then when I'm known by more people in the world, it will be for that. It will be for singing or writing music, or for being a good teacher, or whatever I decide to do. I've never wanted to put my face out to the world for something like this. Which is why, for the longest time, I never did this. And then the couple of times where I thought maybe it's necessary that I try, I had my property being stolen from me. I'm really not... So there's basically a lot of talk about my being mentally ill, because that discredited me from being believed about literally being really tortured. I mean, at horrible levels. And my son, I mean, a baby being tortured at extreme levels. And then I was also then, at that time, of course, talking about how I would call the courthouse, the Chelan Douglas courthouse. And I was getting answering machine messages saying they were closed when they weren't closed. And, you know, I mean, it would be, their answering machine would say clearly, we're open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And I would be calling at 1, you know, and then maybe they had an hour lunch break. They weren't open at that time. I would call at a time when they were open. and then I would get the message that they were closed. That happened. It happened a lot. And I was very shocked, and it caused a lot of distress for me to see that that was being done with the courthouse. And I tried calling the courthouse. And one of the first companies that this happened to me that I was trying to call was Molina Insurance Company. And they're based out of California. That happened before I had it started happening with the courthouse. And when I kept getting their closed message, all the different numbers that I was calling in different branches, I finally got a hold of somebody who was open, and it was the correct time, and I asked what was going on, but it was like weeks that they were doing that to me. I couldn't take care of any business, personal business involving my health care and my son's health care. And it took up a lot of my time and caused a lot of distress. And then every time I talked about it, it sounded crazy. I mean, because most people would think, why would a huge company like Molina do that to you? How could that many people be involved? And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't sure why they were doing that. I know that at the time that it happened, when people finally did start answering the phone, they were always saying that their name is Mary. And so because they kept saying their name was Maria or Mary, and whether that was really their name or not, that's what they kept throwing out to me. I felt that it was possibly retaliation for my suing the Catholic Church. I mean, I didn't sue the entire church. I sued the Archdiocese of Portland, Oregon, and the Mount Angel Abbey. But, one of the monks, as I say, was very connected to the Vatican. And all of that ended up being a much bigger deal than I had realized. I did not know that there were all these clergy sex abuse cases that kids were bringing. Even Catholic kids. I had no idea. I wasn't watching the news at that time. I wasn't trying to join the suing party at all. I think that I was a threat in some ways because of my research into dogma, because I had found a couple things that really didn't add up. And I said to one of the priests, I said, this could cause a loss of faith. And basically, loss of faith sometimes to some priests or higher up business owners translates into loss of money. Because if you don't have faith, you're not going to be tithing. You won't be tithing to that church in faith if you don't have faith in what they believe, right? So that was one problem. That was one thing that made me, I think, a quote-unquote problem for some people. And then the other thing was that they didn't like that I was maybe tarnishing a reputation. And honestly, it wasn't really that I was doing that so much as just trying to protect my reputation, because then they went after me with police and did it secretly, when I wasn't doing anything wrong. And I think that the other aspect was other stuff, but all of the talk about Mary was, I thought, touching on the fact that one of the dogma things that I had researched was about the Assumption of Mary and the Catholic doctrine about Mary, Virgin Mary. I'm not talking about Mary Magdalena. I'm talking about Virgin Mary. And so when Molina has all of these employees telling me that their name is Mary, it just made me think that it was religious Catholic hatred, because they were offended, or somebody told them to be offended by me for questioning that dogma, and then suing the church on other things. So it was a huge deal. And so Molina was doing this for a really long time. And it really did cause a lot of distress, because it ends up being harassment. I mean, you're trying to just take normal calls, to make normal calls and have them go where they're supposed to go, and when they get transferred all over the place, and then you try to tell somebody what's happening, and you really do start sounding like you're crazy, it's extremely distressful. I mean, anybody would feel that way. And then I think what was even more shocking than what Molina did was, And this was Molina in Texas. I had customer representatives in Texas do this. It was in California, Texas, and a couple other places. But even, as I say, even more shocking was the fact that then Chelan Douglas County Courthouse was doing that to me. And I thought, why in the world would Chelan Douglas County Courthouse, the district court in Wenatchee, which is next to the public library, the exact same thing started happening. I couldn't get any of my calls to go through to the regular, to somebody pick up, because anything that was placed by my telephone number was being sent to a "we are closed" message. And just recently, it's October 7th, and just recently I uploaded something from Oregon State University, and if it was someone's attempt to possibly help me be able to do this to me, knowing that I could at least capture it and record it for once, I don't know if somebody was just trying to harass me and thinking that it would continue and I would just sound crazy still, or if maybe someone was trying to help me by allowing me to capture that and then upload it and prove to any of you what I'm really talking about. But I'm thankful that I was able to capture that and upload that, because then you have a chance to see what I'm talking about. And with Oregon State, it was that one day. With these other companies that I've just mentioned, it was on and on and on and on and on. It was more than one day. It was like every day. And then the telephone communication situation got even weirder, because after that happened, and I believe that happened when my son and I were still on Met House Street. I think, yeah, we were still on Met House when that kind of telecommunication problem was occurring. And then when we moved to East Wenatchee, a new thing was happening where my telephone calls, I would place a call to Fred Meyer, and I was getting redirected to, "You have reached Columbia Valley Mental Health. If you have an emergency, please dial 911. Okay, and I looked at my phone again. I thought, how in the world did I get the Columbia Valley Mental Health people? And I look at my phone and see that, yes, I did dial the right number, and I look at the phone book again and make sure, and of course I had dialed the right number. And that was happening, if it wasn't, I was transferred all the time. I mean, I could call Buy Right, or I guess there's not a Buy Right there. I don't think that I called, but Staples, or an office supply store, or any number of grocery stores, and I was getting sent to mental health providers. My phone call was redirected to mental health providers' voicemail. Or somebody sometimes was picking up the phone and answering from a mental health office. A few times, my phone calls were being redirected to some stranger that didn't sound like they were connected to any kind of business at all. It was just like somebody on the other end saying, "Hi, this is Joseph," or whatever. And then telling me, and then sort of harassing me. Like a couple times, it wasn't like I just got somebody random and they didn't know why I was calling them. I was sometimes being redirected to people who seemed to know that I was going to be sent to their, that their phone was going to ring and it was going to be me. And then they would ask me a bunch of questions or make comments to harass me. I mean, it was totally bizarre. And so, of course, then I'm thinking, how in the world is someone able to do this? How can this many people be involved? Because it basically looked huge. And, for my being just one person, having all those problems, it was huge. And those were the kinds of things that were being done to discredit me and, used to say that I was crazy. Nobody else has those kinds of problems. And so it was, you must be dialing the wrong number, you must be psychotic, and you don't even know what numbers you're dialing, was the kind of thing that, was being played off. And my fax machines, that were connected to my printer, I had 3 of them consecutively being fried. It was 3 printers in a row that were brand new, and then after